Class Ceann Comhairle. Well, here we go again. This is the sixth successive austerity budget, the sixth occasion on which government ministers announce a vicious attack on the living standards of low and middle income people and their families. And this Labour Fine Gael government shares the same perverse instincts as the last Fianna Fáil-led administration, shares the same unshakable belief that punishing struggling families is somehow fair. Well, it's not. Neither is it acceptable. And it's deeply insulting to the well-being, not to mention the intelligence of citizens, to constantly parrot the rhetoric of fairness whilst delivering policies that devastate people's standard of living and their morale. It's a joke, and a bad one, to speak the language of economic growth and jobs while introducing another contractionary budget that will further damage the domestic economy, lengthen the dole queues and send more of our people on the emigration trail. And despite all the media hype and the supposed haggling at Cabinet, it turns out once again Fine Gael have it largely their own way. Inequality on Fine Gael's watch comes as no surprise. They don't do social solidarity. It's not in their DNA. Fine Gael take the view that the working poor or people struggling on welfare can be offered up to protect wealth and the wealthy. But today, the surrender of the Labour Party to this agenda is final and complete. The party of James Connolly is now led by the nose, following a course that brings devastation to low and middle income workers and their families. The Labour Party now defends the very policies that so angered them when in opposition, and they stand shoulder to shoulder with the party that they vowed to rein in as partners in government. If Labour's plan on entering government was, as you claimed, to contain and put manners on Fine Gael, then that plan has failed. Labour has surely hit rock bottom when the only government their Minister for Social Protection, Joan Burton, can offer to pensioners who can't afford the new tax on the family home is that they can defer payment until after they die. How gross is that? Just like Fianna Fáil before them, this government runs a twin-track strategy: austerity, cutbacks and charges on workers, alongside a craven appeasement of bondholders, bankers and international financial institutions. And then add to that the truly warped sense of entitlement of senior politicians and the upper echelons of the public service on bumper salaries and pensions, and then the full-scale madness at play becomes evident. And let's be clear, none of this is lost on the general public. This budget is very bad news for everyone who counts the cents at the end of each week, who are put to the pin of their collar just to survive. There's no comfort in this budget for families saddled with negative equity, who are in mortgage default or just muddling by on interest-only arrangements. There's no comfort for them, but there is a tax on their home as they struggle to keep a roof over their heads. For the average working family, this budget means a tax of between €300 and €500 in a full year on their home. It means a cut to their child benefit. It means a reduction in health and education services and a decrease to their take-home pay. And your decision today to set aside the PRSI exemption is truly, truly disgraceful. What it will mean is some €261 per annum, regardless of income. It'll be that cut if you're on €18,000 per annum, or indeed if you're on €180,000. Not alone that, But for working families, this government has now decided to tax maternity benefit. So those that wish to start a family, it now seems, are to be penalised for that choice. This is a regressive measure. It is anti-family and obviously anti-woman. For those out of work, the prospects are even more grim, mainly because you have failed to deliver any job creation plan, despite all of your talk. You very cynically rely on emigration and the loss of our brightest and best to reduce the numbers on the live register. You're going to reduce social protection spend by €452 million. And the pretence by government that they have protected welfare payments is downright dishonest. It is a lie. You are cutting job seekers' benefit entitlement by 3 months. That will hurt people. You're penalising people who try to get back into education by reducing the Back to Education grant. And then for those out of work who need an additional hand, very often waiting for their welfare application to be processed, you cut the exceptional needs payment budget by €6 million. So, the Labour Party claimed, indeed Fine Gael claimed, that they would protect social welfare. We see here today that you have done nothing of the sort. The treatment of children in this budget is really shocking, and it runs against all the fine words and concern for child welfare expressed in the course of the children's referendum only some weeks ago. You're cutting the back to school allowance. That's an allowance for clothing and footwear to get children back to school. And you think it is morally or politically justifiable to cut that by €50. You say that you're awarding an additional €14 million to the Department of Children. That is tokenism at its most cynical and its cheapest. No doubt this little manoeuvre was cobbled together to save the blushes of your backbenchers, who surely must have some strand and sense of decency left. You've cut child benefit again. You've cut child benefit, Eamon Gilmore and the Labour Party in particular, again. And this will hurt families. A family with 2 children will be down €240 per annum. A family with 4 children will be down nearly 700. I don't know if members of this House don't understand what the child benefit payment is used for. So let me acquaint you with reality. It pays for things like electricity bills. It buys for children a warm winter coat or a pair of shoes. And a cut of this order, again, means that families will not be in a position to do those very, very ordinary and very, very necessary things. But of course, you have form in terms of child benefit. And when you cut it last year and then targeted lone parents, you promised us a world-class and indeed a Scandinavian model of childcare to compensate. Well, there's a joke. Ask the parents of Ireland, ask the mothers in particular about this world-class service. And I'm pretty sure you know the answer you'll get. It's not there. This is a bad day for children and a bad budget for parents. And your government has failed the first real test of your commitment to children and to their welfare since the referendum. By direct contrast with this, the government treats those on high incomes and those who are very wealthy with kid gloves. There's no additional tax on individual incomes of over €100,000. There's no real proposal to broaden the tax base. You could do this by levying a charge on wealth, a wealth tax. That's a real property tax. And those at the upper reaches of the civil and public service are still protected, not by the Croke Park Agreement, but by this government. No tough medicine for them. You have flatly refused to address the runaway pay and you've tinkered around the edges of dealing with the pension pots of a very small number in the public service. And by the way, you're the same government that will now go back looking for more from rank and file civil and public servants who exist on very modest incomes. Well, so much for your fairness, so much for your reform, so much for political change. Our country is in crisis. We've nearly 15% of the working population on the live register. The working class is really hurting. The middle class and middle Ireland is hurting too. Families who never thought they'd see the inside of a community welfare office are now pushed to put food on the table and to keep the lights on. We've said this to you time out of number. And yet you sneer at our proposal to introduce an emergency pay cap of €100,000 in the public sector. €100,000 is a very fine income indeed. But you sneer at that because it's not a choice you wish to make. So can I just tell you for the record that were you to make that choice, it would have allowed you to pay for free school books for every child in the state, an additional incentive for one-parent families to stay at work. You could have doubled the budget for school meals. You could have increased the fuel season allowance by 6 weeks. You could have reinstated 950,000 home help hours. You could have restored to community employment their training and materials allowance. You could have done all that. But of course, you don't have the bottle for that kind of choice, because that would be a hard choice. It would also be a fair one. I think your government's "I'm all right, Jack" attitude is perhaps most clear in your failure today to deal with politicians' pay or to deal conclusively with allowances. You've tinkered at the edges. Well, bully for you. Let me just highlight to you some of the things you've left intact. You're still going to give committee chairpersons an additional €9,000 for the glory of chairing a committee. You're still going to give your so-called super junior ministers an additional €17,000 just for showing up at cabinet meetings. And you still shell out huge salaries in breach of your own caps to your special advisors. And I think it particularly ironic, indeed a cruel irony, that Joan Burton, the Minister for Social Protection, pays her special advisor €127,000 per annum. Well, fancy that. The Minister for Welfare cutbacks awards her advisor €127,000. You should have ended that situation today. You should have capped the pay of special advisors. You should have abolished the special payments for committee chairs. You should have gone so much further and placed a cap on politicians' pay. And if you were serious, and if you were worth your salt, and if you were committed to fairness, that is what you would have done. But the truth is, under Fine Gael and Labour, you promised so much, but in reality, the same old boys' club culture remains. And I can see it in my mind's eye, the Economic Management Council, a very grandiose title. I can see on Taoiseach and Taoiseach and the Ministers for Financial Misery, 4 men in a huddle, each reassuring each other, to borrow Minister Howland's words today, that you'd get through these difficult times. Well, good for you. It's a pity you didn't consider how others, how citizens, how families, how mothers and women are going to make it through these times. So absolutely enamoured of yourselves are ye that you still pay yourself way over the odds by European standards. Let me give you an example. The French president earns €20,000 a year less than you, Taoiseach. French ministers are paid €40,000 less than their Irish counterparts. Let me spell this out for you. France is not in a bailout, and its population is 13 times that of our own. So are you really worth it? Are you for real? The health service, as we know, is under unbearable strain. It's just not working. The Minister, James Riley, is not up to the job of management or reform. And under his watch, 870 hospital beds have closed, 1,200 nursing home beds have closed, 950,000 home help hours have been cut from the system, and there's been cuts to disability services. And we also know that last year's budget was a work of fiction. I think it's ironic that this department, the very department that requires a supplementary budget of €360 million, is now, we are told, to be cut by €1.1 billion in a full year. Now the question arises, how on earth will you do this without damaging the most basic of care? The increase in prescription fees, the changes, the cut in the drug refund scheme will all undoubtedly add to the distress of patients of all ages, but I think in particular to the distress of parents with sick children. You give no detail in your budget, no credible detail at any rate, in terms of the savings that you propose from generic medicines or indeed private income from beds in public hospitals. And fascinating, and we don't have the detail on this.
3 minutes then.
Thank you. You're going to make 44 million of a cut to primary schemes. You've hit the elderly. You're hitting their package. Electricity and gas by 23 million, their telephone allocation by 61 million. And of course, you've gone after education again. Once again, you're going to ask third-level students for an additional €250. Now, I don't know if you see the contradiction between your stated position for educational excellence, for a knowledge economy, and then pricing students out of education. But students now see your two-faced approach, and you sold them a pup at the last election. You won't do that again, because the students are no fools. It's less than 3 weeks to Christmas, and families have scrimped and saved to provide for the holiday period. And people don't have very much now, but they still have pride in themselves, in their families. They still have a sense of what is right and fair and just. The need to take tough decisions is a constant refrain of this government, but tough for who? You confuse hard decisions with bad decisions. You look for soft options and soft targets. And the spectacle of a government that talks tough when punishing its own people, and yet time and again returns home from European Council meetings with its tail between its legs, is truly pitiful. It's unworthy of those you represent. Have you had the tough talk with Angela Merkel or the lads from the Troika? Have you told them that we cannot and should not be expected to pay the debts of others? No, you have not. You disguise your lily-livered, gutless interaction with our EU partners with guff about repairing our international reputation. Give us a break. If you're unable to secure a deal on the debt burden, on the promissory note, if you're incapable of deficit reduction that doesn't crush low and middle income families, then you're not up to the job of government. It is actually that simple. You're now 20 months in office and this is your second budget. There's nowhere for you to hide.
Thank you.
You choose the well-worn path of the Fianna Fáil gang that went before you. Fianna Fáil brought this state to its knees, and now you in Labour and Fine Gael keep it there. Fianna Fáil sheltered the rich, protected wealth, insulated privilege. Now you follow suit. Your choice is to protect those at the top and punish the rest. So don't come into this Dáil ever again and waffle about fairness. You are not fair. You couldn't handle fairness, and your budget today is testament to that.
Thank you. Now,